Hello and good afternoon to another session of LinkedIn Live. Today we're going to talk about SAP IAG again, the SAP Cloud Identity Access Governance solution. And what we want to focus on today is the top 5 use cases. As always, I have a couple of slides prepared. So we will look into the slides first, and then also I've planned to really go into the system and show you how the system works, how it looks like, and what we can do directly in the system. Because, PowerPoint is always good and we can show a lot on PowerPoint, but it's always much better to see it, live in the system. And so you get like a little bit the feeling of how IAG works and how it looks like and what we can do within that. As always, I have 2 people in the background. Julia and Shelly will be monitoring primarily on LinkedIn, the chat. So if you have any questions, they will handle those. We also have a couple of links that we will post, so just look out for Julia and Shelly. They will post them. If you have any questions, just ask them. If you can answer them during the webinar, we'll try to do that. If not, then we'll follow up and try to answer them later. All right, so let's get started. Let's look into what we're talking about today. So obviously, first of all, just a quick introduction. Who am I? What's the company I work for? What do we do? Why we're here? And then we want to start looking into IAG. First, I have like 2 or 3 slides, just a little bit about the enterprise, the intelligence enterprise nowadays, and why IAG is such a big topic or becoming a big topic for most of you. And then we really go into the use cases that I want to show you directly in the system. As always, just 1 minute. Who is Exciting? What do we do? Exciting's been around since 2008. We were founded and still headquartered in Switzerland. We have offices throughout the world. We have like 135 employees right now. We're an SAP Gold partner in the area of authorizations management, security. We do a lot of services and consulting services in security. It comes to SAP GRC, access control, IAG obviously, but also security in general when it comes to authorizations management, SAP IDM, single sign-on, SAP cloud security. So if you talk about cloud solutions, IAG, IPS, even IAG, we're one of the gold partners that can support you there. We also have solutions. So we're a solutions provider as well. We create and develop SAP solutions or add-ons to SAP. And there we're primarily operating in the area of access governance and compliance when it comes to SOD analysis, zero trust, least privilege, firefighting, emergency access, but also in the area of security monitoring, making sure that your security or SAP infrastructure not only correctly implemented, but also monitored and continuously checked for fraud, for misconfiguration, for things that shouldn't happen. That's a big topic. Obviously, the entire authorizations management in general, we had a lot of sessions in the past around S/4HANA migration, SAP Fiori authorizations, how we can do redesigns, RFC hardening. So all there, we have a lot of tools that help you, help us, help everyone be more efficient and more securely when we have to deal with authorizations management. Last but not least, we also have certain capabilities in the area of identity access management when it comes to user provisioning workflows, with risk simulations for SOD, user access review, recertification of access. So all in all, we basically cover a wide variety of use cases you might have. So we don't want to talk about us. We want to talk about the topic, and today the topic is IAG, and we want to talk about the use cases. And before we go into IAG, and I apologize for my cough. I picked something up during my vacation, and I hope it's not too bad. So if I cough, I apologize already in advance. So before we get started, just a couple of things, and usually do it in the end, but I want to make sure we have it covered. If one of you have to leave early, we have that covered. This coming Thursday, we will be starting a new series where we have 6 webinars scheduled with different speakers. So I will be one of them, but there will be many others. Also, some of our customers will present the topics. And it's basically 6 weeks full of security topics. We'll start with Fiori authorizations. That's a big topic for most of our customers. So look into the top pain points with Fiori, and then we will work our way through what we can do with workflow solutions, what we can do when it comes to security monitoring, what can be done from a rule sets perspective. Are rule sets necessary, or is it more like an enabler? And then we'll also look more into the cloud, specifically about the cloud identity services when it comes to the IAS, the identity authentication service, as well as the identity provisioning. And then last but not least, we'll have an overview or a summary about all the cloud challenges or the challenges that are now occurring with the hybrid landscape, which we'll also tackle on today a little bit, and wrap the series up with what's new, what are the challenges, what are the solutions when it comes to hybrid landscapes. So that's for the next 6 weeks. Will be one session every Thursday. If you cannot make it and you still want to have the recording, just sign up to it, and we'll send you the recording after the webinar. Julia and Shelley will post the link in the chat, so you can just click there and register. All right, let's talk about IAG. So what have I planned? What want to show you today? First and foremost, when it comes to IAG, there's a reason why there's a solution like IAG. And when we think about the history, and I'm definitely not big into history, but if you think about IT and how IT developed and enhanced over the years, if you think back into the 60s when PCs and all that stuff started, and where we are today, there was a big journey with a lot of development that happened, and IT becomes more and more important. And when we talk about IT today, we're not just talking, we have computers and servers and applications. We talk about intelligent enterprise or intelligent technologies, meaning everything needs to be connected. We have to enable and leverage capabilities from machine learning, artificial intelligence. And like I said, everything needs to be connected. We have a lot of IoT devices, whether it's sensors, whether it's even in your home, you have Alexa devices, you have Google or Apple devices. Everything is connected and linked, and you want to have voice commands, and everything needs to be intelligent. And that's the same for our organizations. It's the same for all our customers. We want to be always connected. We want to have the insight into all the data, because there's a lot of data that's always being collected, and the data needs to be analyzed. And we have to have the insight into the data. So it's a big development and a big evolution into being more intelligent. What that means is nowadays, when we look into, and that's definitely the topic of today, is we will have more and more what we call hybrid landscapes, meaning we have our, let's call them legacy applications, our on-premise applications, whether it's our ECC or even S4HANA. But there's a lot of enablement happening in the cloud. We have cloud applications like SuccessFactors, Fieldglass, Concur, Ariba, and so on, that you're taking on more and more. We also have now a shift from a landscape or from a platform perspective, where we're not responsible, or we don't want to be responsible anymore for hosting all those services, all those applications. So we're using hyperscalers. We're using, for example, the SAP Cloud, the business technology platform, that's also running on different hyperscalers like AWS, Microsoft, Google, or even Alibaba. And we're basically using a lot of different services. There's a lot of connectivity happening, a lot of new services that we have to have under control, because from a security perspective, we have to protect everything. We have to protect, authorizations, authentication. We have to have the provisioning under control in all those applications. It's not just ECC anymore. It's in the cloud. It's the platform. There's a lot of things that are happening when we go into those intelligent enterprises, when we, purposely create the hybrid landscapes. That's one of the topics that IAG tries to address, is basically the cloud. With access control, SAP access control, GRC, we had a lot of capabilities already for on-premise applications. We were able to manage the identity lifecycle. We were able to provision, to do risk analysis, to run compliance check, user access review. We had business roles and so on, but that was all on the on-premise world. Now with the hybrid landscapes, we also need those capabilities for the cloud. And that's when IAG comes into the picture. So most of our customers, or most of you for sure, have the same challenges. Everyone has the same challenges. And if you break it down to just 3 components, it's ultimately provisioning, authorization, and authentication. So how do we provision users? How do we get user accounts created? How do we assign authorizations to those user accounts? That obviously what authorizations we're going to assign, that needs to be defined. We know that from the ABAP world, where we do authorization redesigns, and we want to make sure users are not over-authorized, least privilege principle, SOD, all that needs to be considered as part of the authorizations. And then last but not least, also, how can users authenticate? How can they access an application? We know user password, but user password nowadays is almost outdated. We have single sign-on, we have multi-factor authentication. A user and password is not enough anymore. We need a second mean of authentication, like for example a passcode, or we have to have an app on our phone where we have to approve a login request, and so on. So those are the challenges that pretty much everyone faces. With IAG, we'll definitely tackle on the provisioning portion. We'll look into the authorizations as well, because risk analysis, least privilege, that's part of IAG, part of the GRC program. And then obviously authentication, that goes hand in hand. For that, we have solutions also for the cloud. That's why we have IES, the Identity Authentication Service, that we can leverage also to enable MFA, SSO, and so on, also for cloud applications. But today I really want to focus more on what IAG offers. That's more in the area of the ID lifecycle, and also looking into authorizations, making sure authorizations are properly built from a SOD perspective. That's what we'll talk about. SAP Cloud IAG, and some of you might have already joined the session a couple of weeks ago when we had an overview about IAG. But just in a nutshell, IAG obviously is a cloud solution. It's a cloud product that runs on the business technology platform. So it's a SaaS, it's a software as a service that we can consume. And SAP offers, we need a license and have to do some configuration steps, but it's ultimately a cloud application. The IAG comes with 5 different services. We have them here, from access analysis, that's kind of like, risk analysis, SOD management, mitigating controls. We have role design, where we, create business roles, technical roles, and so on. We have the access request, which is more like the core module when it comes to, workflows, requesting access, HR triggers, and so on. And then we also have on the other side, we have the access certification, which is more the review, the compliance portion of it, making sure users are properly authorized. And we have to do a user access review on a yearly basis. That's part of the access certification. And then last but not least, we also have the privilege access management, which commonly is referred to as firefighter. That's ultimately extensive authorizations that we can authorize on a temporary basis. So from that perspective, if you're familiar with access control, IAG offers very similar capabilities, but it's important to understand that IAG does not replace access control on premise. It offers the same or similar capabilities. Some are one-to-one, but it's a different. It's a new product. It's not a replacement for access control. In certain circumstances, it for sure can, but it's also to be seen as a new product that can extend functionality of access control. So if you have access control today and you're happy with it, but what you need now is maybe connection, a connectivity to Ariba to provision users, then IAG can enable that as well. So we have different implementation scenarios how IAG can be deployed. It can be used standalone, just IAG alone, or it can be used in combination with access control. So that's the what we can do from that perspective. There's different services that offer us different capabilities, different insight reporting, and so on. So let's look into the what I see from my experience. And I've been doing IAG for a couple of years now, a couple of implementation. What are the most common use cases that we see? Obviously, the one I already mentioned is the ID lifecycle, user provisioning, deprovisioning. That's one that's very important. A lot of customers struggle with creating user accounts across the entire landscape. Some customers, they have maybe a CUA, a central user administration for on-prem, maybe you have access control, maybe you have an IDM solution. But if you don't, and you do it manually, then you very often struggle. If you already have one, now the challenge is with the cloud. If you have access control and need the same capabilities for the cloud, then you don't have anything today. You need to look into IAG. So that's a big topic. That's a big use case, obviously, is to create users, modify users, delete users, either in a self-service scenario or automatically from a source, like, for example, SuccessFactors, where we can enable HR trigger. So an HR event triggers something in IAG. Very similarly to SAP Access Control, where we also have the HR trigger with SuccessFactors or SAP HCM. The entire identity access management obviously is the entire ID life cycle. Authorizing users properly, removing access. It kind of goes hand in hand. That's obviously across all the applications, not just cloud, also on-prem, non-SAP, SAP, and so on. We have to look into that, and that's a big challenge for a lot of our customers. Role management, big topic as always. Role mining, a big topic. How do we authorize users? How do we request access? With more applications, it's only going to be more complicated because in the past maybe we had ECC, and we had somehow a role design in ECC that either worked or maybe not as good as we would hoped, but we had somehow we had it under control and it was manageable. Now, when we go into the cloud and we have more and more hybrid landscapes, what happens is we have more roles because we have more systems, meaning that we have more roles. And if a user requests access with the hybrid landscapes, sometimes they don't even know where they have to request access. We have customers that have the Fiori Central Launchpad service, for example, meaning one central launchpad in the cloud that combines applications from multiple backends, whether that's a ECC, S4HANA, CRM, BW. We have one central launchpad, and the user just access that launchpad. So if the user needs more authorizations, the user might not even know which system it is, because I'm just working, whether that's the authorizations from BW or CRM or S4, they don't know. Users usually typically don't know. So what we have to do there is we need to be able to manage that. We need business roles. We have to have cross-system means to authorize and to provision access. And that's when role management comes into play. And that's when we talk about business roles, and I'll look into that here in just a minute. That's one big topic. With that, obviously, also then the entire compliance. How do we, report on it from an SOD perspective, SOX perspective, different ISO certification perspective, to making sure that users are properly authorized with audit logs, audit trail, we know who approved, and so on. But also, a big requirement, user access review capabilities. All that we need to be able to provide also for cloud applications. We did that already in the past for our on-prem, but now the same capabilities we also require for the cloud. And that's also what IAG can do for us. And then obviously, last but not least, also risk management, access governance, risk management. That's a big topic. That's SOD management. We have to be able to identify SOD conflicts, critical authorizations, critical activities within the system. That goes into that. So that's primarily the 5 use cases that we see, and there's many others, obviously, but these are the most asked, I would say, use cases that we typically see and that we typically discuss with customers or potential customers that are looking into IAG. So let me show you what that means. Obviously, from identity lifecycle, just very quickly here, we all know that, when we have identity lifecycle, what do we mean? That means we're hiring someone. During the employment, there is changes to the employment, whether they move from a department to another, whether they get promoted or demoted, or maybe they don't, but that's possible. And then ultimately a relationship or an employment might end. We have to, someone gets fired or someone resigns, and then we have to also deprovision all the accounts. So it's from provisioning all the way to deprovisioning with all the different, reassignment of authorizations because employees move through the organization. And then also along that life cycle, we always have to be able to ensure compliance. We have to be able to make sure that we can provide documents showing who approved and what happened. All that obviously also needs to be in place, and that's what IAG does for us. So let's look into that. When it comes to user provisioning and deprovisioning, what do we have here? We have 2 scenarios. We have the first one. I have 2 slides. The first one is here with just IAG only. And I have it I put it as simple as I can. In IAG, what we can do with the access request service, we can provide workflows. Workflows are pretty straightforward. We can request something. And when I say we can request, that can either be an end user, where we have a self-service scenario, your user requests access because they're missing something, or it can be automatically triggered from HR, which means here's a SuccessFactors Employee Central, for example, from a hire or, when someone retires or job change. Those are events that it can automatically that we can use to automatically trigger a workflow in IAG. So the workflow, regardless from where it was triggered, whether it was from a self-service or from HR, in IAG, we run a workflow. And the workflow has different approval steps. We might have manager, role owner, compliance teams that approve the workflow. And once it's fully approved, and we've done all the mitigations and everything that we want to do as part of that workflow, and I kept this here open. I didn't want to go into too much details because every customer is a little different. But once a workflow is fully approved, whether that means to create an account, delete an account, assign roles, unassigned roles, whatever it is, once it's finally approved and there's something to be provisioned or deprovisioned, then IAG will do that directly for on-prem applications as well as cloud applications. That's the most typical use case. And around that, we obviously have a lot of reports and insight into what happens. We can see what came from HR, what was manually started, who were the approvers, who approved, who didn't approve, was something rejected, were there some mitigation controls added, and so on. It has the simulation as part of that. So we have, risk analysis and so on, all part of that workflow. And then IAG ultimately provisions. In the scenario where we have access controls, a lot of you probably have access control in place today. Access control has been around for a long time. A lot of customers have invested heavily into access control and they have it working very nicely. So all they need is now an extension into the cloud. And that's what IAG can enable as well. We call it IAG Bridge, where we basically use IAG as a middleware to access control to provide the same capabilities to the cloud, meaning we can run risk analysis to the cloud systems, we can provision, deprovision to cloud applications, and we can also do business role management and so on to those cloud applications. And IAG, really nothing else than a middleware there. And we have the same capabilities also if you use access control. So we can request access either manually, as you already know. We can use the HR trigger. If you have access control, we could even use SAP HCM. It doesn't need to be Employee Central in SuccessFactors. It can also be HCM, either or both. And then we also have the HR trigger to automatically trigger requests. And then the same thing is possible there as well. That's what we call the IAG Bridge scenario. So, and also there, obviously then the reports, especially when it comes to provisioning and all that information, the audit log, they will remain in access control, but IAG will provide the information from the cloud back to access control. And ultimately we have that from a compliance perspective, everything will be available. We have the log files, all the information you need from an auditor perspective. We have all the approval steps, everything as always will be provided. When it comes to that entire provisioning, rented lifecycle management, access management, and so on, obviously, we have a lot of different reports, not just what happened. We have also the ability to look into, what has been used. So we have different reports in IAGs that allow us to analyze what has been used, what has not been used, unassociated access. And so there's different reports and insight that we can also use to understand what's going on in my landscape. Obviously, all the audit logs and so on, I already explained that. And with IAG also, what we have is a capability that I kind of like, which is the access refinement. And I will do a demo on that in a little bit. Access refinement is a big topic. As I was mentioning before, users change. When we think about the ID lifecycle, someone joined the company 10 years ago. Today they're in an entirely different position than they were originally hired for. Whether they got promoted, whether they moved from department to department, or maybe they went overseas, whatever the reason is. So access will always change. And for that, you also have to have the ability to do the user access reviews. That's another domain by itself. We'll talk about that in a second. But also access refinement capabilities. And access refinement can mean that we look from a risk perspective, what users have from a risk perspective. Is there something that can be taken away to reduce the risks, to reduce SRT conflicts, or also remove access based on what has not been used? So we have reports that provide us what has not been used based on transaction usage. Basically, that's what what SAP uses there. And if something has not been used from a transactions perspective, then it can be automatically removed based on refinement capabilities in IAG, and I'll show that on the demo as well, so you can kind of see how that looks and how it feels. And I kind of think it's a nice feature to understand how that works and how we could use that as well. So different capabilities there as well. Obviously, role management, when we do access provisioning, when we do the ID life cycle. ID life cycle is not just creating a user and deleting a user, it's also provisioning access throughout that life cycle, whether it's initially or during a job change. And that typically in IAG happens through business roles. Business roles is it's not something new to IAG. We had business roles already in access control, and pretty much every IAM application knows business roles. Business roles, for those of you that are not familiar with business roles, are basically like composite roles, just system independent. It's a container that's only known to IAG, or if you build them in access control, then it's only known to access control. But if you talk about IAG here, business role is a construct that we can create in IAG that holds different or various different technical roles from different systems. And we can see it here, maybe a little bit small on the screenshot. We'll also see in the system later. Basically here I have a business role, I call it like BR, IAG training. And in that business role, I have different access from different systems. You can see here, very small, but these are 3 different systems where we have the exact same role 3 times in 3 different systems. And what does that mean? If a user requests access and a user requests this business role and it gets approved by the content or by the assignment approver down here, which will be myself, if I approve this for a user, then this business role will be assigned. That means technically in the backend systems, in these 3 systems here that are part of this business role, the technical role will be assigned. Whether it's a single role or whether it's a composite role, doesn't matter. It's part of the business role, and that's what's going to be assigned. So business roles obviously are very important, especially important when it comes to role mining. Role mining, what I mean with role mining is if a user, and I'm not talking about the HR trigger because that's a different conversation altogether. But if you talk about the self-service, if a user needs to request access, or maybe I have to request access for one of my employees, or I have a new hire and I want to make sure the user, when they start, they have the proper authorizations. The role mining is the way to find roles and to combine them in a smart way so that the user has the easiest time to find the correct role. So for example, if we have a simple scenario where we have maybe a sales manager, and a sales manager needs authorizations in S/4HANA, they need to have some authorizations in CRM because they have to deal with customers, but they also need some access in SuccessFactors and maybe Concur for their expense management. So they need access in 4 different systems. If I have a business role that we call sales manager, and we add the correct authorization from every single system, then all the user has to do, or the manager has to do, is to request the business role sales manager. So the simpler we have that design on business role level, the easier it will be for the end users to request the correct access. What's behind that business role, whether it's 1 technical role or 17 or 257, it doesn't matter because a user only has to request 1 role. And that's ultimately what I mean with role mining. It's very important, and that's for all IAM applications, not just IAG. It's the same for access control. It's the same for IDM, also for non-SAP IAM solutions. The business role mining is a big topic, to combine them, to build them properly, so users have an easier way to find the correct access and are able to request the proper and the correct access. That's obviously something that IAG can do. We have that capability. It's very straightforward. There's not much we can do about it. We can obviously define it, what access goes into it, what technical roles, whether it's an on-prem, cloud, whether it's called a single role or a composite role or a group or a static group from SuccessFactors. It doesn't matter. It's just an access that we assign to that business role. And then we can maintain a couple of attributes like the business process, sub-process, and then the approvers, content approver, and assignment approver. And then we have the business role created, and that can be used in the access request service, for requesting access to different systems. So that's obviously very, very important. Not only can business role be requested and managed, we can also manage technical roles. So if you obviously synchronize the technical roles like single roles, composite roles, the groups into IAG. We can also provide those attributes to those, and then they can be requested directly as well if you want that. Can also be controlled by authorizations, whether that's desired or not. That's entirely up to you as a customer. But that's all that is possible. From a compliance perspective, obviously, when we assign, we also have to make sure that user access reviews are done properly. For that, what we have is campaigns. We have access certification campaigns. That's campaign driven. We can see here I have a couple of campaigns running. They're not all very meaningful from a descriptions perspective, but we can run different campaigns. We can review systems. We can review the entire landscape. We can review specific users. And we have different ways to have the workflow. So we can either have a one-step approval from a manager, from an assignment approver. We can have multi-step approval for maybe manager and role owner. Different ways possible to run those campaigns. And one big advantage here compared to access control, for example, is that we can run the user access review with different workflow steps. So maybe we say, okay, critical access, we select that specifically. Critical authorizations, they have to be approved by a two-step approval. What's simple is fine with a one-step. Maybe for one system, we want a two-step, for the other not. We can be very flexible to do that. I'll show that in a minute here as well, how that works. And we can obviously always report on the progress. We can see who approved, there's an audit log, and so on. And it's fully automated from a deprovisioning. If access is not required anymore, it will automatically be deprovisioned. Last but not least, risk management. Big topic, obviously, SOD, SOX compliance is a big topic, especially here in the US, but obviously all over the world. When it comes to risk management, it's only going to be stricter, definitely not leaner. It's always getting harder and harder to have it under control because there's more rules, there's more fraud. With the hybrid landscapes, there's more open doors now because there's different systems. So also what we have to be able to do here is you also have to be able to analyze risks cross-system. So we're not only looking into S/4HANA, what risks they have in S4. If part of the, for example, a PO process is in Ariba, then we have to have the ability to run a cross-system analysis because the SOD is not in one system; it's now across two systems, and that's what needs to be, analyzed cross-system, obviously. With that, there's a lot of challenges along the way. Identities is a big topic. Identity is a big topic for everything I mentioned already, also for provisioning for the ID lifecycle, because identities will not be unique. What I mean with that is, if we look from a username perspective, in ABAP, I have a 12-character username. That might be ABANSWER in my example. If I go into SuccessFactors or into Analytics Cloud or Concur, might be my email address or another ID. So it's not always unique across the landscape. There are different ways we can get along and figure it out. There's identity consolidation, which we can do. But that's also one thing we have to reconsider and rethink when we go into the cloud. When we talk about hybrid landscapes, that will be part of the last session we will have on those Thursdays, the 6th session, when we talk about the challenges with hybrid landscapes. That's a big topic. It's a big topic for provisioning because if I request a business role and there's different IDs, ABANSWER here and then my email address somewhere else, the role needs to be provisioned to the correct accounts. The same when it comes to risk analysis, which I'm showing here. Now we have cross-system SODs. The users need to be consolidated. We have to have one unique user. I want to analyze Alessandro, whether that's ABANSWER or abanswer@exciting.com in the cloud, doesn't matter. I want to look into the users and not map them manually. It needs to be mapped automatically by the system. And that's what IAG has different capabilities as well for us to consolidate and, be able to, manage them, from one point of view with one starting point, I would say. So that's in a nutshell from the 5 use cases. So let's look into the system because I talked a lot about slide-wise, and I think you all kind of urged to see it in the system. And I'm also more like a hands-on guy. So what I would like to do is just jump into the system and show you IAG. Some of you might have never seen it. So I just do a quick overview. So here where I am, I basically, I'm in the cloud. So here, this is where I have my test, my demo landscape, and I have different means to authenticate. Obviously I use single sign-on. I could also use like a local user, but here we just use single sign-on. You can see that here. And for sure in the demo, it never works. So let me just redo this. That was probably a timeout. Give me 1 second. Somewhere here. Okay, so let's try it again. So here we go. So this is the landing page of IAG, obviously a cloud application. The entire front end is Fiori based. So this is typical Fiori. We have the tiles. We have like the app finder application, very similarly to what are used to from any other cloud application that runs on Fiori, or even the on-prem Fiori Launchpad is Fiori. We can move tiles here and so on. So nothing different there from that perspective. So what do we have here? We have different sections. Obviously, I'm an admin here. I have all the authorizations. We can see here I have a lot of administrative tiles. I have different reports. And then for the different services like access analysis, role design, access request, and so on, I have different applications. So let me just start somewhere. Easiest will probably just let's look into like an access request. So just so we have seen it. As I've mentioned before, access requests can be started either manually, like I'm doing here. This is basically self-service. Oops, and I obviously took the wrong app because I wasn't looking properly. So let's just create an access request. This is self-service where I request for myself or someone else. If I want to request for someone else, that's a different tile. Here I'm just requesting for myself, all authorization driven. So if you want someone to be able to do that or not, that can be controlled. What can we do here? I can request new access. I can look into my existing assignments and change them. And here, I tried this before, it didn't show properly, but that's just my system. If I want to request access, I can search for it. There's different filters we can do if you want to search for access in a specific application. That's obviously possible. And you can see here we have like SAP ERP connected. We have S/4HANA on-prem connected. We have SuccessFactors, Analytics Cloud, and even the IES connected, the Identity Authentication Service. And I can request access pretty much everywhere. I can request business roles. I can request technical roles, as we can see here. So for example, here I have standard roles from SAP for specific systems, like for example, for my S/4HANA development system or demo system. As for these, my demo system, different ERP system, and so on. So these are technical roles. We also have like business roles. And here I can request myself, so I can select what I want, request it, and then say create request, and I can fill in the details and request this with validity periods. Manager will be read automatically if you have it set up correctly, and then I can just request for myself. This will go through a workflow, so workflows can be slightly configured. It's not as flexible as access control, at least not today. SAP is working on that with the business rule services that is working behind or that is being used in behind. But workflow wise, not as flexible as access control, but here obviously we can say which path it should take, and then in that path we have different approval steps, maybe manager, role owner, and they can approve that. How does that look? I don't want to do it here. I just want to show you briefly. Also have to watch the time a little bit, but obviously there's an inbox with an approval inbox. You can see here I have like 19 requests that are pending for my approval. In some, I'm working or I'm operating, or I'm acting as the manager. In others, I'm the role owner. I don't have any compliance here. And obviously, if I go in here and I say, hey, let's take like one here, when I'm as a manager, we can see what was requested, from an access perspective. Just take a little bit to load. We can see for who it was, like here's just a test webinar. What was requested. Here was like a business role requested. I can see what's part of the business role. So I have like the drill down to see, what's part of that business role. Literally here, just one role in my S4 test system. And what can I do here as a manager? I can approve or I can reject. What's the beauty here is I can immediately see, are there any risks? So here we can see no risks. We can also see it up here. There's no risks. So that's the integration with the risk management, what I was mentioning before. SOD, all that part obviously is part of the workflow. And then, I could submit that, basically approve, or if I do reject, then I would submit my rejection. But that's just typical workflow management, workflow approval steps. As I mentioned, from a access request for provisioning perspective, that can be done self-service or automatically. So there's also HR events that we can report on. So if it comes from success factors, which I have a couple here as well, then obviously there's rules in the background that says, if that, then that. And I might have some, maybe not. No, I don't see any here. They're already processed. Let's see if we see them here. So that's obviously like logic we have to build. If like in simple form, if a job is if an employee is created with a certain job, we can make a mapping and say, okay, if job 1, then assign business role 1. If it's a termination event, then what we want to do is we want to delete the user. That's a map. It's a logic, a mapping table that we have to build, and then IAG will do it. The way we're basically saying. I don't have any good samples here, but that's all possible. From the user perspective, I was mentioning, we have unused access, we have actively used access, we have unassociated access. So we can also get insight into what users use. So for example, here, if you look into unused access, and I want to see, hey, for user A Benzer, which is my user, what does Alessandro have that he hasn't used? And we can see here I have different roles in different systems, like in my S4 test system, in success factors, and so on, of access I haven't used. How is that determined? Always we have to be a little bit careful, especially in the ABAP world, because what it's basically doing, it's reading from the statistical usage data, ST03N, it's similar to action usage report and access control, and it looks into the role, what transactions are in the role, and have I used any of those transactions or not. And that's what transaction usage means, or unused access means. That doesn't necessarily mean that the role is not required. For that, we have to use other tools, like Exciting provides tools, with the productive test simulation to simulate that, productively, whether something is not used. But that IAG is not on that level. It's really just on transaction level. That's where you have to be careful. That's why we have third-party solutions that can really do that all the way down, so we can be 100% sure something has not been used or will not be used going forward. But obviously we have those insight reports here. We can look into it and can play and get an overview and understanding of what's going on in my landscape. So a lot of insight is obviously possible. Different reports, we see it here. There's a handful of reports, and here we should also see the HR that I was trying to show you before. If we have any ones that we have not processed, we should be able to see them here from success factors. So obviously all that also can be reported. And we see here we have some stuff that wasn't processed. There was a change in success factors, so we get the information from success factors. My business rules that I have defined, my logic, did not capture this because maybe it was a different event. This was like a higher, whatever that event is. I don't know. Usually it's like higher. This is a different event that I have not, considered in my logic. That's why it comes up here as a missed HR event, because something was processed in HR, came over to the interface, but was unable to be processed. That's what I can see here as well. When it comes to the business roles, just very quickly, let me show you that just so you have seen it. Business roles have different ways how we can create them manually. There's different tools that allow us to do the business role mining, to build them initially before they can be assigned based on usage, based on roles assigned to users. There's some logic SAP has. Typically, it's very gimmicky. In some use cases, it works, but it's only as good as the data in the background, in the backend systems. It's a little bit gimmicky. So mostly what we do, we create them manually. As we can see here, I have like 34 different business roles, whether create them manually or through the tools that SAP offers. At the end of the day, we have business roles. Let me just pick one, like for example, this one here. You can see here I have a business role, has a name, a description, assigned to business process, is active, so can be used in the workflow. And what's nice here is also the integration with the access risk service, with the risk management portion of it. We can see this business role has 45 risks. And basically it consists of 37 SOD conflicts, so segregation of duty conflicts, and 8 critical access risk, critical authorizations, or critical action that we have defined in our rule set. So rule set, exactly same thing as in access control, just in IAG, a little bit different format, but ultimately the exact same thing. What do we see here as the business role? What I was mentioning before, we have access from different systems. So here the same role, the exact same single role. We can see here this is a single role, and this role exists in 3 different systems. In my ERP test system, in client 1, 601, 602. And so if a user requests this business role and it's approved, then IAG will provision that to all these 3 systems. Okay, so we're requesting one role, but it's going to be assigned in 3 different systems. And obviously we can see down here, who are the approvers. We also have the audit log, what changed, who created it, who maybe changed some attributes, and so actually down here, who created it, and so on. So the audit log is always given, so we always know who did what, who made a change, what was changed, and so on. So this is from business roles perspective. Obviously, there's different ways. We have like overview dashboards where we can see how many roles we have, how critical they are. There's different insights into the data, obviously, as well. Here it takes a little bit to load. My system is a little bit slow because I've loaded a ton of data just to test performance. It's not always super fast. And if it doesn't show up here in 2 seconds, then I'll just abort this. But obviously, there's also different, we can see it here is now loading, different dashboards insight into what we can see. Like you can see here how many roles I have in my system, just because, I loaded a ton of stuff just to see how it performs under, real or not real, but a lot of data. So you can see I have a lot of stuff here in the system. Then obviously always drill down, we can click into data and see, what makes up the numbers, what makes up the statistics, and so on. So business role management, obviously a big topic, but pretty straightforward. We can maintain those business roles. We can obviously also maintain all the regular roles, so technical roles, groups. If you import them from Ariba or from SuccessFactors, all those can also be manually maintained. Meaning we can define assignment approvers, so they can manually be requested, and we can see it here. So we have here different like dynamic groups, composite roles, single roles from different applications like SuccessFactors, S4HANA, and different applications that we have loaded. And here we can obviously also maintain approvers, business process, and they can also be requested manually. That's still possible even with IAG. We can say, I just need one role in S4, requested. There's an approver. We can, that approver can be an approver. Typically, and the recommendation is definitely for business roles. So shoot for business roles as much as you can, because it's easier from an end user's perspective. And IAG can handle those very, very well. If there's a change to business roles, if you add a role to business role, maybe because there's a new system, it will automatically also provision the users that already have that business role. Or if you remove a role from a business role, it will also deprovision that role in all the backend systems. So it's much better to use the business roles because IAG can really handle them. What I also want to show you is, and let me just take a sip of water here because my coughing gets worse. The more I talk typically. Obviously, what I also want to show is the access analysis. So there's different reports and different applications that allow us to look into access risk. So obviously we can do analyze user access. There's even enhanced reports. We can look into control, into mitigation control assignments, all that. But there's also reports that give us an overview. So we see it here. Dashboards is always a big topic, so we can see who are our worst users from a risk perspective. Which business process, from a quarter perspective, how did we develop? Did we get better? Did we get worse? Obviously here, this is all test data, nothing really meaningful. This will be much better in a customer system where you have real data and you can really see the trend. You can see really what's happening. And so always with that drill down into that as well. If we look into the access analysis. And let me just open one up so you can see it. Let me just get one user like myself, just search it. You see here, and just ignore the names. We have played around so much. So sometimes I'm Janet, sometimes Alessandro. I don't know why I'm Janet sometimes. But if I show up as Janet, that's still me. So here I have, like, for example, my user, and we can see here this user is ultimately consolidated. We have, like, access here from 2 different success factors applications, and here what we can see is you have risks. I have, like, 8 risks again, 7 SODs, 1 critical access. There's no controls, so we see the risks here. There's no controls assigned. That's because we haven't done it for my user here. But obviously, what could we do here is just mitigation process. So we could select here mitigation controls, and they should be available. Maybe someone played around with my system, but we could assign mitigation controls here, or typically we do it throughout the workflow where, when there's a risk, it needs to be mitigated. And then it would obviously show up here as well. So that's one thing we see. And then obviously also the audit log, if we have done any remediation activities and so on. What's nice here is you see that here we have the possibility to do refinement. This is the access refinement I was talking about. There's different ways how we can get into the access refinement. One entry point is for sure the access risk analysis. That's usually where we do it, because I can see here this user has risks, and we can say there's different roles assigned to the user. Not every role is causing risks. Maybe because we don't have a rule set for this system, or the role is, or the group is not critical. But what can we do here? We have the ability to do a simple refinement or a more advanced refinement. If I click on simple refinement, what the system will try to do here, and it's always, let me take the other user, which is a better user. Give me 1 second. Should have taken Janet. Obviously a little bit more risks than I have, or the other user has. This is a different user. What we can do here is we can see that, let me close this once again. We can see the user has 263 risks, SODs and critical authorization risks. Obviously a lot. Test system, SAP all and the like. So, a lot of authorizations. So what we can do here is we can look into how could we refine the authorizations to, for example, become risk-free. So this is the access I have in HCM, ERP, S4, probably S4 HANA somewhere, Success Factors, Analytics Cloud somewhere down here too. And what I can see here is, first I can see usage, and I can also see the risks. And you can see here, like, this role I have used 2 years ago. So what IAG proposes is to remove this, because the usage is 2 years back. It has critical risks, and because it has critical risks, let's remove it. Others here are also removed. Why are they removed? Because they haven't even been used. There's no usage on those. Some other, and it's not always accurate, or it is accurate, but it's not always accurate in my demo because I have not everything properly synchronized. You can see here others, and obviously some systems like here HCM I have not synchronized properly. That's why there's no usage. But here it's like no usage, and that's what it's trying to propose is what can be removed because it has no usage, and because it has no, or because it has risk, it has critical risks. And I can see that with the current risks is 263. If I accept the proposal here, I have 0 risks if I remove those roles. So this role here has critical risks. That's why SAP says, or IAG says here, remove it. I can say, no, actually that role, because it has been used 2 years ago, but maybe let's say that it was last week or yesterday or today. We say, no, this is actually, the user needs this. You can also say, hey, no, he needs that. And then refresh here. And we'll see, now hopefully we'll see a couple of risks here, because if I accept this refinement, the risk will go down because I accepted some others that have to be removed or can be removed, but this one I don't, and I can see what happens then. So what this allows me to do is I can quickly in a sense of like, when here it's doing a cross-system risk analysis across all my 30 systems I have connected. That's why it takes like a minute or so. But now it's running a risk analysis, a cross-system risk analysis with an error. Obviously, that's always the when I show a demo, it's always the problem. But I hope you understand what I'm trying to say here. And usually it works. Yeah, I got a timeout for whatever reason. So what I can do here is it proposes me what can be removed. And based on that, I can run a simulation to see if I accept this, would the risks go away or not. And I can do this based on usage and what users have used on a role level. Or I can also do it in a more advanced way through the risk. So where I can see the risk and I can see the portions of the risk with the functions. And I can say here, oh yeah, the user, Alessandro, actually, he's not even doing APO. So let's remove the APO stuff. And then we can remove it here. And, we can, simulate that again and see how the risks will change. So there's different ways how we can refine access, which is great from a risk perspective, from a compliance perspective, but it's also great from an identity lifecycle perspective to, follow really the approach of least privilege, remove what's not used, especially if it causes risks. If it's not being used and there's no harm in removing it, remove it. That's what IAG here, can do for us and can, propose us, what would be possible to be removed. So IAG offers a lot of features. You can see there's a lot of applications. The last one I quickly want to show is with the campaigns. With the user access review, I have here one. We can see here I have different campaigns ongoing. We can see the status, so we can see where they are. We can see here there's like 4 that are processed and like 194 are still open. So we're 2% done. I can see currently it's pending with assignment approval, so the role owner basically. And I can obviously go in and then also see who are the reviewers. The reviewer here is Alessandro, so I'm the one that hasn't done the job, or at least not totally yet. And what's the review here? What's the campaign? Is for one user in 7 systems, and that user in those 7 systems has 88 different role assignments. That's because I have SAP all a lot. And my user is not the best test user because I was reviewing myself. And here I can obviously then act on it. I can close the campaign if I want to stop it because it's not getting done. Or the reviewer can obviously complete the task as a reviewer inbox similar to the access request management, where I can act on my task. And I can see that here, like I have that test webinar where I'm at the moment acting as an assignment approver. In some others, I'm acting as a manager. So there's different ways how we can run it through a workflow, and then the dedicated approver, and it's a manager, role owner, compliance approver, can review that and say, hey, yeah, this is needed, not needed, can approve, reject, and then complete that access certification. So overall, there's a lot that can be done in IAG. A very, very interesting product. Definitely worth looking into, especially if you have access control today and you want to extend those capabilities into the cloud. Then IAG is, the perfect solution for you, because it can really extend what you have today. So all that investment you have done in the past will not be lost, and you can extend into the cloud. You can still reuse access control. You can slowly move into IAG. In my personal opinion, IAG one day will be able to replace access control. For most customers today, it will not be possible, simply because IAG is not as flexible as access control. On access control, we have the MSMP and BRF Plus rule set engines, and we can also add custom code, ABAP code, and do a lot of. We're very flexible. We can do a lot of customization even within standard approaches. We're not modifying the system, but we have a lot of means to manipulate how workflows go, how they flow, who's an approver, who's not. Maybe in certain cases we need a second approval, in others not. All that or not. All of that is possible in IAG, at least not today. I think it's going that direction. That's why, in most cases, IAG cannot replace access control as of today, but it's definitely going into that direction. With that, once again, as of this coming Thursday, we're starting the 6-week series, SAP Security series. We call it SAP Security Wednesday typically in Europe, but now it's on Thursday, so we call it SAP Security Wednesday on Thursday. We have 6 sessions, starting on Thursday with Fury, and then all the way through to hybrid landscapes, where we look more into what we can do. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing you all in the next sessions. If you have any questions, as always, just feel free to reach out either on LinkedIn or by email, and I'm more than happy to answer the questions you have. And with that, I thank you for your attention and wish you a good rest of your day.